All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for making our time to join our webinar today. My name is Grace Oguntade, Communications and Learning Specialist for Mexico, Nigeria. We're here to talk about the EU BRICC Programme, Building Resilience in Complex Crisis Programme. What has been done on the program so far, what are the learnings on the program, and then what approaches do the program implement that can be sustained by the partners that were involved on the program. So to kick things off, we have our consortium partners who worked with Mexico, Nigeria to implement the BRICC program, members from DRPC and CUPI. So they're also going to be joining into the conversation and also sharing their learnings of the program. So for today's agenda, let me just do a quick preview of the agenda. So for today's agenda, we're going to be having an opening remarks from our country director, who will be aptly represented by the chief of party for our SIP program. Right after, we would have an overview of the context and a background of the EU BRICC program. What was it like? What's the project like? What were the key things that the program set out to achieve? And this will be presented by the program consortium director, and that's Mr. Freeman Mulea. Right after, I would have the impact findings. We did an assessment of what the program has implemented so far, and then this will be a good opportunity for us to share the findings from the impact assessment. So we would see how the program has been able to perform. So right after the impact findings, we would have a question and answer section with everybody present here. For all those who want to learn about the various components of the program implemented 5 key components: unconditional cash transfer, financial inclusion, agriculture. There were some activities done on social cohesion and assets, youth livelihood, and social protection. We have our consortium partners here too, who will be chiming into the conversation and also responding to some of your questions. And we're going to be ending right at 3:30 p.m. with the closing remarks from the team. So let's move on to our agenda quickly so we can keep to time. And please, for those of us who are joining from outside Mexico, DRPC and CUPI, our government partners, our supporters online and offline, feel free to drop your name in the chat box. You can introduce yourself in the chat box. If you have any questions, drop it in the chat box. We would pick up the question and ensure that your questions and your comments are responded to. Thank you. So we're starting now. So the next item of our agenda, welcome remarks by the country director. And let me check if David Katari is on the call. Okay, over to you, David.
Yeah. Thank you, Grace, for the invitation. My name is David Gatare. I'm stepping in for our country director, who is not available, but is sending greetings to you. And as Grace mentioned before, I'm chief of party for one of the Mexico projects called Community Initiatives to Promote Peace. I want to, on behalf of Mexico, to recognize our distinguished participants who are here this afternoon, whether they are from the government, from our donors, from the BRICC consortium, or other members of staff from Mexico and other colleagues who have come out of those categories that I've recognized. We want to welcome you and have an honor to host you in this closeout session of BRICC, which has already started and will climax tomorrow. For this particular day, which is online, is a very significant part of the process of the closeout. And in the project implementation, a closeout section is very, very important because first of all, it's where we celebrate all the success that we've had together, but also take cognizance of what may not have worked very well and draw lessons on what you can improve, but also on what has worked and which we can scale up. It also is very important in terms of accountability, because we are accountable to the communities that we serve, and therefore need to demonstrate and show what we have been doing together for the last years that we've been implementing this project. So very, very important from the side of implementation of projects. And I want to invite you to listen and contribute to these discussions and to the presentations that are going to be made. And I thank you so much for your participation, and the discussions are hereby open. Over to you, Grace.
Thank you very much, David. Please, can somebody confirm that they can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, loud and clear from here.
Okay, some people said they couldn't hear me. All right, so we're going to thank you very much for that opening remarks, David. It's a very clear indication of what we should be discussing. What are the plans that we're setting out in place for the scale up of this project? We're going to move right into the next item on the agenda, which is the program overview by the program director. Freeman, feel free to share your screen and present.
Thank you very much, Grace. Thank you very much, the BRICC team, and greetings to everyone who have managed to join us today. I will give a program overview of the BRICC program. So this program, basically, its aim was to build resilience for households in Yobe State, and it really, its main objective was to ensure that the beneficiaries that we serve, they cope with the shocks and stresses of conflict, climate change, and the complex crisis. We worked on this consortium with two international partners, which is Mexico and Mexico. It was, the partners were DRC and CUPI, and Mexico was leading. Our local partners were UN and TWOD. So we had some local partners whom we worked with in this program. So as I said, the goal was to support early recovery from and to build resilience to conflict-affected vulnerable communities. And we're doing this in one of the states in Nigeria, which is Yobe State. Our target was 26,875 households. This was our target. Then what was the aim? I think the aim of this project was to ensure a transition from the emergency to early recovery and to resilience. So we were aiming to use the graduation model to move communities from where they are in vulnerability and improve their livelihoods, improve their capacity to cope with stresses, and also ensure that we build their capacity in terms of financial inclusion, the cohesion of the communities, and the capacity of the government institutions. We also made sure that everything that we do it in an integrated way and engage all the stakeholders along the way as we move along the project. So this was a 40-month project, which started in April 2019 and is ending this month in July 2022. So just to give a background of the Yobe State, as I said, we are implementing Yobe State. Yobe State is in northeast Nigeria. It's with they have about 17 local government areas, and this area is surrounded by Borno State, Gombe, as you can see from the map. And out of the 17 LGAs, MESCO and the partners under the BRICC program, we worked in 6 local government areas. And this Yobe State is one of the areas that is affected by insurgency. And there is a lot of transition of communities to Yobe and out of Yobe. So we have those challenges, which is the main challenge in terms of security. So we worked in 30 communities in these 6 local government areas, and each partner was responsible for 2 LGAs. So that's the brief background about the LGA and the communities. So what was this project about? You will notice that it has 5 thematic areas or outcome indicators. The first one was on social protection. And in these thematic areas, we appreciated that the Yobe State has they have a framework that they use in terms of aligning stakeholders and their work in terms of social protection and safety nets. We also recognize that our role was to ensure that we support our participants in terms of the unconditional cash transfers and other cash initiatives that were there to ensure that we address the immediate need of the communities, as well as ensure the transition from the emergency situation to early recovery and resilience. So this was a core thematic area, which according to our model of the graduation model, this is where we started to have our main beneficiaries, and we have to build our beneficiaries as we move along with other thematic areas. So the second thematic area is about conflict and peace building. So in this thematic area, we worked with community resilience groups, we worked with local authorities, we worked with local leadership to ensure that the communities are involved in decision making of what they need to do, to ensure that we have an engagement of all the stakeholders in terms of community development and what the communities need to prioritize for their own locations which they are. So these initiatives included among doing the disaster risk reduction plan and also engaging the communities, finding solutions to the challenges which they have within the community, and also advising decision makers of the challenges and possible solutions that the communities feel they can help them to improve their livelihoods. So thirdly was about the livelihoods, and this component was facilitated through the community-based process, and we had community-based facilitators. We did a community-based facilitation process, which allowed us to identify the opportunities that the communities can engage in and what are the gaps that are there. And also we managed to identify those who are keen to be influencers in the communities and the models, those who can build up the initiatives that have been identified in the communities and try to make sure that they improve their livelihoods. And also there is an opportunity for financial inclusion also. How can we ensure that the livelihoods which communities are doing, they sustain themselves as they move along with their livelihoods. Then we have climate smart agriculture, which was key. Yobe State, a lot of agriculture is happening. So we have to improve, we have to find ways to improve the productivity, and we work very well with the state agriculture department to build the capacity of smallholder farmers and improving the agriculture practices. So this was the fourth intervention, and then the last thematic was key to us was to work with youth and women. So most of our beneficiaries were youth and women, And we had key interest in the youth, and we provided youth with some trainings. And then we also provided women with some skills in terms of financial inclusion. And we had about 17 skills that were identified through the labor assessment. And these skills cuts across tailoring and the automobile, among other skills. And it's good to know that this process was done with the support of the National Directorate of Employment, who really assisted with the artisans to train the youth, and we provided the capacity. So having said the thematic areas, I would like to share how our model worked through this program, and this will clearly define our multi-sectoral and graduation model that we use, which really assisted us in terms of collecting the impacts and the lessons and ensuring that all the beneficiaries that we worked with, there is a graduation process, and we integrated interventions, and we ensure that there's layering amongst all the interventions that we provided. So from this end, we, as a program, we supported the single social register, which is housed in the State Operation Coordination Unit, which we call SOCU. So the single social register, the BRICC program managed to support or coordinate with the SOCU to register vulnerable communities in our 6 LGAs, and we also supported the SOCU to register in other LGAs. So for the BRICC program, we managed about 40 plus participants that we managed to include in the social single social register. This register is where any interventions that we're doing, we're mining from this register. So it allowed us to make proper targeting and coordinate with the state government in terms of who are we targeting, and with the agreed vulnerability criteria. So from this, under the social protection, BRICC program supported 33,858 poor and vulnerable households with unconditional cash transfer, and these beneficiaries that we supported through unconditional transfer, we did this with the support of the government. Among other things that we did for government, over and above the support that they provided, we provided the system strengthening. We had to capacitate the SOCU, which is the State Operational Coordination Unit. Also, we developed, among other things, with other NGOs, is the social protection policy, which will guide the state in how social protection initiatives needs to be done, what are the deliverables that need to be complied with, and what are the targets for each department in the program. Also, we worked with the state. We worked with the state in terms of the social protection implementation plan that will help the ministries, department, agencies on how they can implement the social protection policy. And this had milestones, outcomes, and the activities that needs to be done. Among other things that we did in terms of strengthening was to train the local government chairman and the budget officers on social protection. Also, we trained the M&E focal points for the LGAs. Also, the SOCU also were trained on M&E. This was to ensure that the single social register is kept live, and as we transition, they will be able to manage it and ensure that it is well coordinated within the state, and all organizations and interested partners in social protection will manage to utilize it and also mind their beneficiaries, update the single social register as we move along. One of the interventions that we did was from the social protection and this unconditional cash, we have to identify some of the beneficiaries whom we engaged in the social cohesion and peace building initiatives. And these initiatives were 30 community resilience groups, and these groups, among the vulnerable communities that we mined from the single social register and those who benefited from the unconditional cash transfer were the local leaders who participated in this. And then we had women from other initiatives like the serving groups. They were part of this community resilience group, and we have youth also intentionally who were part of these community resilience groups. So these groups, basically, they were managed the project, they coordinated all the development initiatives in their area or in their community. Among other things, they were doing dialogue session based on the need or initiative that they need to address. And that they were key in terms of the feedback session, in terms of how the project is moving along, what are the challenges, and they also participated in decision makings and in finding solutions for the program. So, and among other things, also on advisory in terms of security situation and keeping our beneficiaries safe in the environment that we're working. Mind you, as I said, Yobe is an insecure state, which is affected by the insurgency, and there is need for these groups to also help in terms of dialogue, engaging on security issues and updating all the beneficiaries in terms of how best we can intervene, implement in a safe way that will protect all those are involved. So among the things that the groups did was, as I said, they engaged in all program activities. Also, they were involved in developing the disaster risk reduction plans. And in these plans, they prioritize a community development initiative. That is, what community assets, what water points do they want to do in the communities that will address the conflict issues. Firstly, secondly, that will ensure that whatever challenges that they were facing, it might be maybe in terms of doing the nutrition gardens or other livelihood initiatives, what is it that they need for them to do that? So those mandatory dependence initiatives, we manage as a program to do 111 community assets across the 6 LGAs and the 32 water points, and these are solar powered water points. We managed to upgrade 4 vocational centers, and then with a number of health facilities, market hubs, and construction of classrooms, also provision of the desk for the schools, among other things that we did. And these came from the community dialogues, engagement with communities, prioritizing the community assets that needs to be done, and they also providing the sustainability plan on how they will move along when the project ends, how they will ensure that these projects are sustained and that they live longer. So the other thing, the other initiative that happened from, as I said, this is the graduation model. So from the 38,000 unconditional cash beneficiaries or participants, we managed to form 281 SI groups. These are serving groups. And these serving groups, they were key in terms of ensuring improved livelihoods and engagement in the petty trade. And also to note is one thing, because of the context where we are working, we managed to work with a number of ministries, among the Ministry of Religious Affairs, in terms of helping us how we can make sure that our serving group initiatives is appropriate and Sharia compliant. And they were very key. They were very key, and they really helped us in ensuring that we come up with a document that will be Sharia compliant. And other leaders, also other stakeholders, they helped us in terms of coming up with other ideas, especially the banking sector. They also helped us on how they can adopt and ensure the Sharia compliance. And some of these beneficiaries, they really benefit and they can work freely and then compliant with the rules of the state. So among the other things, we had financial inclusion, with the Minister of Commerce assisting the groups in terms of the registration. And also, as I said, the banking system. We developed the product with linkages with the banks. Yobe Microfinance is one to mention. The Ministry of Youth also provided some youth grants, some COVID grants, to 12 of our groups, which is one of the achievements that was there. We had also the off-farm livelihoods, where we identified some youth, women, and men to implement some of the off-farm livelihoods. For youth, we had 6,500 youth that we trained on vocational and entrepreneurship training, and there were 17 skills that were identified through the labor assessment. These youth, the reason why we selected them from the social protection or the vulnerable communities that have been identified is to complement the unconditional cash transfer that we have been provided. And it was part of the transition that I initially spoke about. So to ensure sustainability and continuity of the youth, we ensure that all the youth, they register with the Associated Trade Association. Those who are doing tailoring, they register with the Tailoring Trade Association. Then we also link them to the small businesses. And then also some of them, they were engaged in saving groups in a bid to ensure that their business remain viable and they can save. And we also link them to the banks, among them the Yobe Microfinance, so that they can get loans, they can be supported in terms of business management. We worked with the National Directorate of Employment, Minister of Youth, Minister of Women Affairs, and Minister of Commerce, among other departments that we worked with. This program was led and by the government departments, and we were providing the capacity and ensuring that the targeting and the compliance in terms of the engagement of the youth and the women or all the participants that we're working with is in compliant with our regulations and the state regulations. So the other initiative that we did was on agriculture, on farm livelihoods. So in this case, we trained about 8,800 smallholder farmers in terms of livestock production. And then we had about 3,200 who received smallholder farmers who received seed and inputs and small livestock. Small livestock was mainly targeted to women. And then all these smallholder farmers, they formed producer groups. And we have some of the producer groups who really benefited from the NISAL. NISAL provided loans to these groups in the form of inputs because they had bigger farms that they've opened up. So they were supported by NISAL. And they really did well and they managed to repay the loans. And this is an initiative that we're linking the private sector to our groups as part of the sustainability. So what you can notice, all these initiatives in green, the financial inclusion, the off-farm livelihoods, the agric, they were mostly integrated. We ensure that we integrate our interventions and ensure layering. And for example, those who are doing financial inclusion, the women, they're also involved in agriculture on-farm livelihoods. Also, those who are doing off-farm, the youth, also we encourage them to do the saving groups and involved in the financial inclusion. Also, the youth participated in the decision-making, in the dialogue, and making decisions on which interventions, which assets, which community assets needs to be upgraded, needs to be constructed, and what are the sustainability measures that are being put in place. Also, we have some people in the financial inclusion, Saving and Investment Association who participated also in the dialogue sessions in the communities and also in the on-farm livelihoods. So basically the project model was designed around the social protection and ensuring we are graduating all our beneficiaries from the unconditional or dependency or emergency, transition them to early recovery, and then to the resilience by linking them to the private sector, by ensuring that they are supported by different government institutions, by ensuring that they register to the government and access some services and loans which are provided in the state. So in summary, this is the project brief and the summary of how we progressed as BRICC program and how we supported the beneficiaries of Yobe, and also how we managed to move communities from the emergence mode to the early recovery and the resilience stage. Thank you very much, Grace.
All right, thank you very much, Freeman, for that interesting presentation. I think one of the key takeaways that stood out for me was the importance of integrating our intervention, because a lot of organizations implement humanitarian projects, and then it's always about the participants being dependent on those interventions. It's always very good and very important for us that in whatever intervention we are doing, whatever projects it is that we're implementing, let us seek for opportunities to continue to build the resilience of the community members who are involved. And that's one of the key learnings that we have to take away from the BRICC project, integrating the various interventions from financial inclusion to opportunities to save, livelihood for them to build their skills so that they could start their businesses and continue to provide for themselves and their family. Because in as much as we like to be in a position of where we can help, we want them to also be able to provide for themselves. Those are the kind of takeaways I want all of us to start taking from this meeting, from this webinar. And I also want to hear from our guests on the call. Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments? Do you have any learnings that you have picked up from Freeman's presentation before we move on to the next item on the agenda? If you have any comments, questions, you can raise up your hand and we'll take your comments before we move on to the next item. Okay, so I'll take it that we don't have any comments for now, but you can keep your questions in mind and then we'll address that during the question and answer section. So Freeman, can you stop sharing your screen so we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, okay, so we have a question from Abubakar Umar. Let's quickly take Abubakar's question.
Okay.
Abubakar, feel free to share your question. Your mic has been activated. Abubakar Umar, your mic is activated. Can you ask your question, or is it a contribution that you want to share? Do you? Oh, you're speaking is like you're still on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, since you can still hear him. Please feel free to drop your comments or your questions in the chat box. We're unable to hear Abubakar, so we'll be moving on to the next item on the agenda. So we'll be taking the presentation on the impact findings from the project. Seeing that we're able to implement some of this, all this interesting intervention, work with all these key government and community structures, the government agencies to the community resilience groups, local artisans who will help to train. So what were the learnings from this approach? And then what are the recommendations that can be taken on by other partners or the government agencies who will be continuing with the sustainability of the project? So this presentation will be taken by Surab, the PAC director, that's the Program Quality and Development Director for Mexico, Nigeria. Over to you, Surab.
Thank you, Grace, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Saurav Chakraborty. I'm the Performance and Quality Director for Mexico, Nigeria. And today, this afternoon, we will be presenting in two parts. First, I will take you through the evaluation findings, and then Mr. Shadrach Stephen, our Strategic Learning Manager, will present the important learnings from this 3 years program. Next slide, please, Shadrach. Already, Freeman has provided you a very good context. I just want to reiterate that BRICC focused on building resilience of 26,000 plus households in the Yobe State and supported poor and vulnerable households to cope with shocks and stresses of conflict and climate change and reduce the risks of future conflicts. So first, let us start with the overall achievements. For every parameter, achievements have surpassed targets, be it households receiving unconditional cash transfer, number of SIA savings members, number of smallholder farmers, youth or government officials trained. So we have surpassed our targets. Next slide, please. Given the breadth of this evaluation and the need to triangulate findings, we adopted different research methods and analytical lenses were employed during this evaluation, including meta-text review and document analysis, key informant interviews, FGDs, stakeholder mapping, and a survey. The evaluation adopted a customized methodology rooted in OECD DAC evaluation criteria framework, which is based on dimensions like achievements, relevance, efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. Next slide. The evaluation assessed how the BRICC program facilitated community, household, and individual movements towards resilience, and how its components addressed preparedness as well as adaptive and absorptive capacities of our target participants. Next slide. The assessment was based on performance program indicators compared to baseline and midline results, focusing on 5 components of this important program, which are social protection, improved peace building and conflict management initiatives, improved livelihoods and financial inclusion, facilitation of climate resilience agriculture, and vocational training for youth. We calculated, before we go into the top line findings, I just like to mention one thing. The sample size was calculated using standard formula, taking into account the population size, margin of error, standard deviation, and the final calculated sample was 384, which was proportionately distributed to the 6 LGAs as per participant size. And we also conducted FGDs with various community groups and key informant interviews with stakeholders. Now, our first top line finding. In terms of diversification of livelihoods, at least 4 in 5 people in targeted population reported diversification of livelihoods. The percentage of females who have restarted livelihood activities on a regular basis is higher than for males, as well as the percentage of females who are recovering livelihood activities on a regular basis. Next slide. In terms of social cohesion, 94% targeted population reported greater social cohesion, and at least 95% of targeted population are comfortable with interacting and mixing with others in most of the platforms. Next. The BRICC program has enabled beneficiaries to cope with shocks and stress through enabling participants to start businesses, 57%, recover old businesses, 11%, pay child fees, meet household needs, 28%. And in addition, about 71% reported a shift in most urgent needs from basic survival to recovery. And females reported higher in terms of this against males. And this is a notable shift from midline value of 49%. Next slide. Resilience, in terms of resilience capacities, this has shown tremendous progress. 91% females and 92% males mentioned that they are prepared. 86% of both the genders are confident to recover from shocks, and 87% females and 81% males reported that they are capable to adapt to any shocks. Next. Most participants are confident on their capacity to sustain current livelihoods, which is a good indication of possible sustainability of participants' livelihood. Next. The results demonstrate that there was an increase in both volumes and variety of goods for both food and non-food items in local shops and markets. Next slide. Also, we have found that 24.78% of participants have displayed improved savings behavior, a significant improvement from baseline, which was 0% at that time. And also 27.97% of participants restarted recovered livelihood activities on a regular basis, which is again a significant improvement from baseline. Next. So, a summary of the major findings, we could say that major changes reported by participants include greater social cohesion, a shift from basic survival to recovery, improved resilience capacities, implementation of resilience plans, diversity of goods and services in markets, local markets, and sustainability of livelihoods. BRICC has made tremendous progress in terms of gender equity, as demonstrated by diversification of livelihoods, whereby there is a difference from baseline where females were less likely to diversify. Baseline percentage was 40.3 for females versus inline where females are more likely to diversify, and inline percentage was 83.78%. These are some of the top line findings we wanted to share with you, and now over to Shadrach to take us through the learnings.
So thank you so much, everyone. I believe you can hear me. Surab, can you confirm?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Surab has just given us the findings from the headline of evaluation. So I'll be taking us through some of the learnings that have come out of this big program. Permit me to mention that we started documenting learnings right from the start of the program. Up until the end, where we were able to get an evaluation firm to do a learning evaluation. So what I'll be presenting are top line findings from what we've collated right from the beginning to the implementation towards the end, and then qualitative data from the evaluation that an external evaluation firm conducted. Sorry. Now, to start with, the external evaluation firm were able to categorize some of the findings that came out into two at individual levels and households. Recall one Freeman was presenting, I think the target was about 26,000. So out of this target, we're able to document learnings, individual level learnings, and then group or community level learnings. Now, at individual level, some of the findings that were coming out was improved livelihoods. It came out very clear from the presentation that Surab just gave before this. Majorly, we're able to get this data through FGDs, and the participants affirmed to this. Now, another was the issue of self-esteem. Most of the participants who were interviewed confirmed that their esteem has been built in such a way that they are able to interact, they're able to discuss, and they're able to also iron out issues within their community. So they're able to talk and air out their views and opinions prior to when they were engaged on the program. In terms of saving capabilities, participants, just like data showed from the endline evaluation, data showed that people have been able to move from emergency to early recovery, and then becoming more resilient to shocks and stresses, which was the overall goal of what we wanted to achieve on this program. Now, at the group and community level, what is coming out now is there is clear community collaboration. People are able to sit together, they are able to bridge social capital to be able to initiate transformative capabilities and then solve issues within their communities. People are also able to apply the knowledge that they've gained as a group and then as a community. When Freeman was talking about the 5 different teams for this program, one of them was the conflict management, and we work very well with community resilience groups. So these people have been able to work with knowledge that they've been able to gain throughout the implementation period to be able to see how they are able to solve issues within their communities. Now we are also able to see transformational resilience across groups and communities beyond the individual level. Now there's increased trust. Participants are able to trust their government, and then they're able to trust their leaders as a result of the intervention they've gone through this. In the next slides, we will see some of the major findings that have come out clearly from the evaluation, from the implementation of BRICC. One key that has come out very well was working with government. This, we believe, will guarantee sustainability and has built trust. Right from when this program started, from when Freeman mentioned, BRICC worked very closely with Yobe State government, working with the social registry, getting participants from the social registry. So right from the beginning, we were working with government. And as a result of this, Yobe State now has a social protection policy. And like Freeman mentioned, beyond having the policy, something that has been done is relevant. Our stakeholders have been trained, implementation plans have been developed. So it's just to roll out this social protection policy, which is key. And we are happy that Mercy Corps really worked with government, and government gave that opportunity right from the beginning to be able to collaborate, and then for this program to be implemented. Another thing was localization of activities and market systems, which has empowered the communities where we are working. Everything Freeman mentioned about constructions that has happened, all these were done with community resources. Whatever that was done was within Yobe State. As a result of this, this has gone a long way in improving the economy of Yobe State, ensuring sustainability as well, because most of the resources, most of the things we did were locally resourced within the community. One of the things that BRICC has also done is to be able to link those participants to artisan groups, and then to relevant places where they are able to get either loans because they've been formed into cooperatives. So this is one key learnings, that if we're able to localize activities and work with the local markets, then it will go a long way in empowering communities and then boosting the economy. Now, another, it's participants are reporting increased family income. Evaluation findings showed that majority of people have diversified. So they started with either 1-2 forms of livelihood, but they've been able to diversify, and data showed women diversified the more. So now, as a result of this, people are getting additional family income to be able to take care of their immediate needs. Also, availability of water, resources like water has gone a long way in reducing conflict. One of the themes that this program was working on was conflict management, and we work very closely with the community resilience group. And so water points, different things have been able to be established. This has gone a long way in reducing conflict based on information that we've gotten from participants who were interviewed as participants or participants who were beneficiaries of BRICC. Now, also use of improved technology like pesticides and the likes yielded improved productivity. Many people harvested more than they were harvesting prior to gaining this knowledge on how to use improved technology for farming. Another thing was also increased farming yields due to improved availability of water. Now, because we're able to do different sources of water, people were farming dry season and then rainy season. So instead of farming once a year, people were farming twice, and so they were getting more yields from their farm produce. So farming twice instead of just one during the conventional rainy season that we know. Use of community structures facilitated the acceptance and then ownership. Right now, the community in Yobe State and the state government, I believe they've owned this. Like I started by mentioning, there's that social protection registry. There has been several trainings. Implementation plans have been developed such that even when BRICC leaves, these people are able to continue to be able to own and take over these initiatives that have started. Lastly, as a result of data that we've collected from the field routine monitoring data, this data has enabled the program team to be able to make informed decisions and then adaptations. If we're not collecting that routinely, probably would have not been able to make that informed decisions. So one of the key learnings was routine monitoring and data collection really helps and plays a major role in ensuring the right adaptations are in place and then the right decisions are made, especially working in an emergency context like Yobe State. Also, Freeman mentioned over 6,000 youths who have been trained. Data that we got or information from participants showed that those who went through the entrepreneurship before vocational are able to better manage their businesses. So going forward, one of the things that we'll suggest is people go through the entrepreneurship before vocational. There were people who went just to the vocational training. Now, another learning as well that came out is that courses that are designed or tailored to participant needs goes a long way in ensuring that they are sustained, they are maintained, and then it increases participation of people who are involved in this opportunity. So we strongly believe that there should be a need assessment. First of all, what is even obtainable within the, so that there's no saturation of the market. So what is obtainable? What are the interests of people so that people are matched according to their interests. So once this is done, there will be increased participation, like I said, and then it will be maintained and people will be able to manage properly. Also, one of the learnings we got was seasonal and contingency planning ensures that we implemented a better program. Of course, there was rainy season, there were conflicts here and there, so many things. So there were contingency plans and they were constantly reviewed. And of course, we had to plan based on the seasons. This enabled us to yield better program outcome. Lastly, participants who benefited in multiple interventions from the program seem to be able to cope better with shocks and stress. There were different interventions, 5 teams. There were people benefited from livelihood, the youth component, the social protection component. So people who benefited from these diverse interventions tend to be able to be more resilient and able to cope to shocks and stress than others who benefited from one. But one good thing that BRICC did was to be able to ensure that participants benefited from most of these services that were provided. Thank you so much. Grace, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Shedrack, for that interesting presentation. And I also like the fact that we had all those key learnings broken down into different segments. So we have come to the section of question and answer, where we want to hear from our guests on the call. I also have questions of my own that I want to ask the team, because I want us to be able to break down those key sectors, all the big grammars that the big technical grammars that we've been using. So people who are outside of the INGO space, who are outside of the development space, would understand the concept of our work. When you tell people we are building resilience, we're addressing the shocks and stresses, we are doing conflict resolution, we are doing diversification of livelihood, we want to be able to explain these things so that the layman, the average person who is doing their own professional work, can understand how this concept helps to improve the lives of the participants on our programs. So before I start asking the team the questions that I have, I want to hear from other guests who are on the call. If you have any question, please feel free to raise up your hand so that we can get more insights from the team.
Hi, Grace. There's a question for Shukrab on the chat.
Okay. Stephen Ichiko says, hi, Surab, great presentation. I would like to get a clearer understanding of your sampling method and the source of data for population of the communities you intervened in. Surab, did you get the question?
Yes, Grace.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. As I mentioned briefly during my presentation, the sample size was calculated using the standard formula taking into account population size, margin of error, and standard deviation. And our final sample size was 384. And as we mentioned that we had around 28,000 plus participants in 6 LGAs where we worked. And we proportionately distribute this 384 in these 6 LGAs as per the population, as per our participant proportion in each of the LGA. And that's how, and then we randomly selected this 384 from the 6 LGAs. That was more or less the design which we followed. And this was the design which we used during baseline and midline also. So to maintain uniformity, we had to use that design. Thank you. Hope I have answered your question. Over to you, Grace.
Okay, Stephen, I hope that answers your question. You can give us a thumbs up or give Surab a thumbs up. Okay, and then we also have 3 questions from Ilya Shew. So Ilya is asking, what are the different vocations the youth were trained in and the duration of the entrepreneurial and vocational skills training? Number 2, is the training durations across all the vocations the same, or does it differ per the type of vocation? Okay, so that's 2 questions under the youth livelihood component. Who is going to be responding to this? Paul, do you want to respond to this? That's Paul Enude, is the program manager. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Grace. So from the question that was raised, we actually have identified 17 different skills ranging from aluminum works and glass fabrication, automobile electricians, automobile painters, automobile welding and panel beaters, bag making, barbing, bicycle repairs and maintenance skills, cap making, blacksmith, furniture making, groundnut processing, I think knitting mats, and so on. So basically, in terms of their training, we had some skills were for 6 months, and also for some skills were for 3 months, ranging or depending on how the skills, what's the demand of the skills, and they were trained in batches because of how the program is being implemented. So we had different graduation timelines for different youths who graduated over the course of the program. I don't know if my response or my answer really responds to your question. Thank you.
Yeah, so she also asked, what were the different vocations that the youths were trained in?
Yeah, I think I just answered that. That was the first thing we have 17 different skills. Bicycle repairs, barbing,
Yeah, but just to add to, sorry, Grace, just to add to what Paul has also mentioned, it would be interesting for Ilya to also understand that before we are able to come up with all of these skills that Paul just mentioned now, that we actually conducted an assessment, and the assessment was looking at the demand side and the supply side. The demand side of the skill to see, are they viable, are they not viable? And it was also through an inclusive process where the youths were also shared with opportunities to decide which skill is best fit from the communities where they are. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the additional details, Hugh. Okay, another question from Matthew. Matthew says, it will be good to reflect on how this significant achievement has been made possible, given that the project was done in a security volatile areas. That's very important. Any key learning to inform resilience programming in volatile context? I actually had a question on resilience because I wanted the team to elaborate on that. Hugh, I think we need you to respond to this question.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, this is a very interesting question, and it's been everyone really wants to know how some of these things play out. But for us, I think when you talk about resilience, is the ability for our programming to be able to support families and communities to address their observative, adaptive, and transformative capacities to change. And so for us, we could not do this alone. We had to partner with local stakeholders, and importantly with the government, and also with security agencies within the state to support access, and as well as, provide us with the required information in terms of supporting people. So for us, one of the most important lessons for implementing a resilience program, and people ask what is resilience, and basically resilience, like I mentioned earlier, is just our ability to adapt to change, a positive change, to have options, not only one option, but in a simple time to say someone has the ability to change to option A and move to option B, option C, and option D. And that's what resilience is all about. And earlier, Freeman talked about using an integrated approach, which is more like the graduation model in implementing resilience. And you find out that in implementing resilience, you are not only doing education, you are not doing only cash. You are combining a number of activities that are integrated to ensure that that household is out of poverty or out of that situation where they are and find themselves in shock. So our ability to implement program to allow people to get out of shock and for them to understand how not to get into shock next time. So your ability to ensure that this household, as they are receiving unconditional cash, you're also engaging their youth in vocational skills. You're also supporting the agricultural component of the program where some members of the families are. You're also engaging communities to promote peace. There are quite a number of areas that you can use the graduation model. But one of the key learnings is that communities have capacity to change. Even in conflict-affected areas, there's every tendency from what we have learned for communities to accept the program and then support in implementing the program, and then, of course, in getting that desired change. And the only thing I would say lastly here is that it's through inclusion, where we designed with the community, implemented with the community, co-monitored with the community, with the support of the government. I don't know if I'm able to answer your question.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. I think that should answer the question from Matthew. There's one other interesting question in the chat box. Dr. Adam says, please, what is the sustainability strategy developed to ensure continuity of the recorded success? I would like to direct this question to the program director because he actually shared a few insights on that. Freeman, can you share an insight into the sustainability strategy?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question, Dr. Adams. And so this program, the way it was designed, and we made sure that the issue of sustainability, we work it from the beginning of the project. So all our interventions revolves around and they has the thinking for sustainability. For example, if you look at how we identified interventions, we involved the community resilience groups, and they were the one to make decision which assets to implement and which one not to implement, which one to start with and prioritize. And you will see that most of the 7 groups that we had, they came from unconditional cash transfer. So understanding the transition that they are doing. So for us, we made sure that the key success was on the government engagement, ensuring that in all our interventions, we have relevant government department taking a leading role, supporting them, and ensuring that they are coordinating with our beneficiaries. We also made sure that in all the interventions that we do, we also provide the private sector and other organizations that will help beyond the program. One example that I can provide is Yobe Microfinance. They are really assisting our savings groups in terms of provision for loan, the banking facility, and also our youth in terms of providing the business support, in terms of training and linking them to vendors who provide reasonable prices for them to get their startup kits. So we made sure that all the people that are key in terms of moving forward beyond ourselves are active from the start of the project. And as we talk now, the communities and those involved, they are working very directly with them from the last 6 months of the project as part of the transition. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Freeman. I would also like to hear from our partners, KUPI and DRC, because I know you guys work in specific LGAs where there are some strategic government partners and community structures that you work with. Do you want to share some of your key approaches for sustainability so others can learn from you?
Before then, Grace, there's a question from Rabi Sani in the chat box. You are supposed to check into this.
Okay, Rabi is asking, great presentation. Did you cover all associated costs for training or co-finance? Was there any co-financing involved? So I'm just wondering who is going to be in the best place to answer that, program director?
I think I can take that one.
Okay.
Yes, initial stages, as we talked about the transition model or the graduation model. The initial stage, we covered everything. We provided support. As we moved along, for example, when the Saving and Investment Association or the saving groups were registering with the Minister of Commerce, we did the co-funding. Some of them, they registered directly, they paid the amount that was required. Some of them, we provided a small percentage and they complemented that. So we had a model where we co-funded, and then in some instances, they will go 100%. Even for the startup kits, we had a situation where we're giving 80% and they complemented the other 20% for them to buy the startup kits. In some instances, based on the context, we provided 100% support. So it was depending on the context, the location, the dynamics that were there on the ground. We're also defining what model we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Freeman, for that insight. I see some people's hands up, and I want them to speak. Mr.
Albert is there.
Mr. Anantawi, your hand has been up. Do you have a question for the team?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for the public invite. I had many questions. Some of them were answered. But I see in your implementation that there's good coordination with government. So I am a bit curious if the vocational training you provided, is the certification like recognized by the government? Or yeah, pretty much that's it.
Okay, Paul, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you very much. So in terms of the certification, we worked closely with the Ministry of Commerce to ensure that these savings group were registered, their businesses were registered, and also the youth as well. Working also closely with National Directorate of Employment and at the local government level and the Department for Small and Medium Scale as well, were largely involved in the registration processes. And not just that, and I think the groups were also scrutinized by the Department for National Security in the local government, just to ensure that these individuals were not trying to form associations that would be detrimental or hazardous to the community where they all reside. So that is just that, and they were provided with invoices and receipts for all registration processes that were carried out at the LGA level. So it is basically an empowerment for this association and access to finance as well, and very accepted by the communities. Thank you. I don't know if my answer responds to your question.
Grace, can I add on that?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So just to add on that, good question. The thing to note is we facilitated the process, but the National Directorate of Employment provided the artisans to train the youth. So this is how we engage the government, and by default, that means the government accepts the curriculum we were using was in line with National Directorate of Employment. So we worked with them to improve it, but definitely the government was involved, and all the certification that we did are acceptable by the stakeholders in Yobe State. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Anatawi, I hope that responds to your question.
Yes, I'm not involved in Nigeria response. I work in Northwest Syria. Just because also this is a problem that we face that we couldn't get into. Like we want to provide informal education for people that dropped out of that they could not were not able to continue. So it's just an alternative certification, but it's for us it's not recommended.
Okay, all right. How about, okay, I see two hands up. Perez's hand was up first, so let's take Perez's hand, then we move on to Albert. Okay, Perez, please feel free to share your question. Perez, you can unmute and ask your question, or you can drop it in the chat box. Okay, we can't hear you. Perry, feel free to drop your question in the chat box. We'll move on to Albert now so we can keep to time.
Thank you very much, Grace. I'm building onto the whole aspect of resilience building, which the director had already started using and explaining. So the other aspects which I'm adding on is that when we implemented the projects, you'll find that we're using community mobilizers. We're using extension workers who are local. And by imparting the skills on resilient design, it means that knowledge remains with the local institution. Whether MESICOPS goes or not, that information continues to be imparted to the farmers. And the farmers themselves who were trained on resilience design, starting from the challenge, which is frequent droughts. So they have to harvest the water, which is in their own plots, and they use it more effectively to produce crops more effectively, and use local resources to produce pesticides and improve soil fertility. So you can see from the design, you are using as much as possible local inputs so that there is no need to import things from outside, no foreign currency required. And that brings the whole aspect of resilience. And they are then able to take it from that level and train others. So you find farmers who learn from other farmers, and it can upscale much more easily. And in terms of certification, which was being discussed for the youth, you find certificates were also offered, which were signed by the implementing partners and also by the Department of Employment, NDE, by NDE. So different certificates come in, but it recognizes the skill which is being used. But to a large extent, they were trained by artisans who have the practical experience and understand the context of the markets where they are operating, so that these youths start from relevance in terms of the competencies they need so that the product is marketable to the demands in the local area. So that is what is inbuilt into the system. So that brings in that sustainability aspect. So you are building and strengthening your local institutions and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Albert. How about our team? Albert, would you like to introduce yourself to the group so everybody would know from which background you're speaking from?
My name is Albert Jaure. I'm the COOPI BRICC Program Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take one more feedback from Dr. Adam, then we'll attend to more questions from the chat. So Dr. Adam, I see your hand is up. Do you want to share any feedback to the team, or do you have any question? Your mic has been unmuted. Dr. Adam, are you still with us?
Grace, I think there's another question from Fashion. Can you check that? Anu is asking. There's a question from Anu.
Okay, so we have some more questions from the chat. I see Surab has responded to the evaluation and learnings related question. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the question from Anu that says, what was your biggest achievement around gender equality and social inclusion? Who is going to be responding to that? I want to get a volunteer from our partners. DRC, do we have any team member from DRC? Do we have our DRC team members on the call?
That's okay, Grace. We can just take the question, yeah, so we can move on.
All right.
But I can make a contribution.
Okay. Albert, go ahead.
Nice. Okay. From gender perspective, we did have targets where we were trying to make sure that when you are selecting participants, at least you make sure that as close as possible to 50% are women, as also explained initially, that when we were looking at the aspect of skills development, the priority was given to youth and women particularly, by empowering them to be able to make sure that they have a livelihood. And when they can contribute to the economy of the household, it gives them that ability to participate in the decision-making at household level. So the whole aspect also, you also find that starting from the first result, which is social protection, women were identified to a large extent as the beneficiaries to receive the cash on behalf of the household, because evidence also shows that they tend to use it more effectively for the household and for the household nutrition. There have been, some undesired results in terms of limited gender-based violence, but where those occurred, those were then referred to CRGs so that the communities can actually deal with the problems, addressing challenges within the household so that they educate their male friends on the importance of relating very well to the women and how they can actually mitigate that. So women became more involved in public debate on what has to be done. That has empowered and allowed them to be able to participate, to choose resilience. So that, to a large extent, is an empowerment. When you have the resources, when you can make decisions, you can control your life. I thank you.
So Grace, just a quick addition to that in a second, just to also say that I think for Anu, that's a very brilliant question. And I'm only just going to say that from the proposal development time, I think the program was very intentional about ensuring equality and equity for the participants, and at all, and that was mainstream across all thematic areas of the program, from cash transfers to youth livelihood, to women in savings group, and also to many other areas, even at the community level in terms of decision making, where CRGs were selected. Opportunities were given to women, men, youth, male, youth, female, or equal opportunity to participate in the decision making in terms of the program design and implementation. So Anu, is a brilliant question. We have champions on this program and they've done very well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that additional insights. I was really hoping I could hear more from our partners because there were some strategic implementation that they were involved in. So I want to ask this question on social cohesion. Social cohesion is a concept that we get to hear being thrown around at different points of our intervention or across most of our projects. No, for the average person on this call now, or for our team members who are not so familiar with the idea, the modality of social cohesion, I'd like to hear from the team, what was the approach that the project employed with trying to address social cohesion? What was unique? I see somebody's question here saying, what was the significant changes that was observed in the program? The concept of social cohesion, it's an in-depth concept on its own. So I would like to hear from the team. Who do I call now? Can you explain the concept of social cohesion and what the team tried to achieve in that sector?
I'll go first, if there's no one coming in. Right, on social cohesion, initially, we were trying to make sure that the communities understand the dynamics of what connects them, what divides them. So within the context, within the community, you try to promote those issues which bring people together, the events which connect them. And then you minimize on those activities which tend to divide them, right? And then you also then try to make sure that there's equity. So when things or resources are not shared equally, you get resentment. So those who continue to be marginalized don't feel part of the community. They are not involved in the decisions which everybody else is doing. So, but when they participate, even if resources are limited in deciding who is a deserving household, who is a deserving candidate, they get the satisfaction of having been consulted, and they've been part of building the strategy or activities around and determining the type of growth which they are going to be dealing with. So that has been very instrumental. And then the other area is, as you create the CRG, it becomes a structure or building capacity of the local institutions to analyze the challenges they have, right? And so when you analyze the challenges, you are able to mitigate. That means addressing the causes of the problems, that's the mitigation. And then find ways of also addressing the effects, which is the adaptation. When you address the effects of the issues affecting you, be they climate change, be they conflict, you know. So within this, we have now trained the communities so that they can analyze and come up with solutions to move forward as households, as communities. So that brings that collective action. And you find they are now able to deal with the conflicts, particularly between farmers and herders, without having to go to the courts. They can address them at community level. So that changes the mindset. And that in itself brings that teamwork and the sense of purpose. Those are part of the issues which we were really focusing on these things. And being able to identify the transformers, the youth who are change makers, and then you take advantage of their connections and let them drive, run with the ball. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Albert. That was a very good insight. Helping people to see the collective issues and helping them to work together to find solutions to those issues. I like that. We've approached the end of our webinar, and I see that we still have a lot to discuss. And it's been very interesting hearing the key insights from the program team and the feedback from all those who were able to attend today. So I'll be calling on you, the field manager in Yobe, to help us to summarize the key takeaways and all the key learnings we've discussed today and what we are able to take away from this webinar. Over to you, Hugh.
Thank you very much, Grace. And thank you to all our internal and external participants for this very interesting meeting. BRICC has been a very interesting program, but most importantly, the last 3 years, what BRICC has actually been able to promote for people to see is social cohesion, like Albert just talked about, integrating internally displaced persons within communities with the host community, which has been a huge challenge, but this program has been able to achieve that, bringing people together for more of discussion and for peaceful coexistence. Ability for the program to also able to achieve engaging youth, creating over 3,000 jobs is a key milestone. Ability for this program to work very closely with the government to develop a social protection policy that will be like one of the key sustainable process in terms of building resilience and moving from emergency to recovery. Ability for this program to also able to, drive the financial inclusion sector, working with farmers, creating market, working with existing markets, promoting market system development, providing linkages between farmers and linking farmers also to suppliers and producers, and also creating that linkage, that synergy, that even after the program, there's still a sustainable path for them to lay on. Ability for this program to work with women and work with the government to create avenues in terms of providing access to finance to women who ordinarily don't have opportunities to grow, start any form of enterprise or business. Ability for the program to be able to provide that linkages and getting a strong commitment from a government that has provided over 40 million as loan to our program participant. What other milestone are we looking at for? So for me, I'll say this program has done a lot. Team that has been able to push through, pull resources, and being resilient all through the way. Ability to overall look at our engagement with partners, communities, and then of course, building their resilience, but in all, ensuring that they take leadership in terms of the implementation. I would like to say a big thank you to all those again who joined in the participation, to Freeman, the program director that has done very well, to Paul, the program manager over time that has been able to be very dogged and very resilient in pushing program activities, to our partners, Albert, who is the program manager for KUPI, Musa from DRC, and the rest of the team. I would like to say a big thank you to all of you as a consortium. You've done very well. You've done great things. Tomorrow, we are going to be having the live event in Abuja here to engage our stakeholders and do a physical closing of this program. Thank you, Grace, for hosting this event as well, and to all those who have made this webinar a success. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, everyone. We've come to the end of today's webinar. Great appreciation to everyone and have a lovely day. Bye, everyone.